Good evening, everyone. There's still some people coming in, so we'll welcome everyone as they find themselves to our webinar tonight. Just a reminder, for this program, you will not appear on the screen and your microphone will be muted. Now that you're in the broadcast, you're invited to actively participate by typing messages to the panelists or other attendees through the chat icon. Just mind the feature where you are chatting with everyone versus Westerheim Folk Art School for more targeted comments or questions. You can also use the Q&A function to ask a topic-related question during the program. The Westerheim host will facilitate a Q&A session for the second half of the event, using questions submitted through that function. In some sense, this is like attending a lecture at Westerheim, but the room is much, much bigger. And we will focus those questions, like I said, the last part of there. So you can put them in as a panelist are talking as a question arises, but we'll wait until they're done with their presentations before we facilitate the question part of the program. My name is Leah Lovelace, and I'm the Director of Folk Art Education at Westerheim. We have created this program with the goal of connecting community during this time of the pandemic, but also to showcase some of our amazing folk art personalities that we have through Westerheim, such as tonight with Patti Goke, Elsa Bigton, and Phil Odin. We are so excited for them to share both their amazing personalities and their perspectives as living and breathing folk artists in the contemporary world today. Support for this program is provided by the Iowa Arts Council, a division of the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, and the National Endowment for the Arts through the Federal CARES Act legislation. It is also supported through the Huebner Education Fund. If you enjoy this evening's program and want to help Westerheim continue to offer programming like this, we hope you'll consider becoming a member. If you are already a Westerheim member, please consider making a donation online at westerheim.org. Especially now during these challenging times, memberships and financial gifts to the museum are especially appreciated. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Josh Torkelson, who is the Folk Art Program Coordinator for all our digital learning and outreach programs. Josh? You're
Good
muted.
evening, everyone. I have the opportunity to introduce our folk artists tonight. Our folk art panelists tonight will discuss their work on Disney's Norwegian Pavilion at Epcot. Phil, Elsa, Patti, and their teams worked on all of the woodwork and painting in the recent Frozen remodeling of the buildings, and they'll share how these different craft elements have informed and influenced patterns, design choices, and overall planning. These master artisans will also discuss what it means to share craft in today's world and in a location like Disney that serves millions of visitors each year. First, we have Patti Goke of St. Cloud, Minnesota. Patti has been rosemaling for over 30 years and has taken many classes with both American and Norwegian artists. One of her rosemaling experiences was painting in the Raftvold Hotel in Hornindal Nordfjord in Norway. Patti is a Westerheim gold medalist, a Westerheim rosemaling editor, rosemaling letter editor, and contributor of rosemaling articles and projects for the Apprentice online e-zine. She was the guide for Westerheim's 2014 and 2016 folk art tours to Norway. Next, we have Phil Odin. Phil is a professional woodcarver and also a Westerheim gold medalist. He trained in the Jarlide School in Dobre, Norway, and he and his wife, Elsa Bigton, have a workshop near Baronet, Wisconsin. Together, they authored the books Tresjara Kunsten, The Art of Woodcarving, and Lara Bok I Tresjering, Textbook in Woodcarving. Elsa Bigton was born and raised in the village of Spjelkavik in Ålesund, Norway. Traditional Norwegian handcraft was an element of daily life for Elsa's family for many generations. Elsa makes furniture designs and carves acanthus leaf ornamentation influenced by the Baroque period. Elsa studied at the Jarlide Woodcarving and Furniture Making School in Norway, where she met her husband, Phil. In 1979, they established the traditional Norwegian woodcarving business, Norsk Woodworks, in the small rural town of Baronet, Wisconsin. Since then, they've made their living by designing, making, and selling traditional Norwegian wood carvings, furniture, and architectural elements across the United States. And I have to say, I've been looking forward to tonight's talk for quite some time. I heard a rumor back in September that the three of them had done this work, and I remember telling Leah, do you know anything about this? Is this true? Do we have celebrities in our midst? And it was really fun to get to learn about their experience, and I'm excited to share it with you today. So I will turn it over to our first presenters, Phil and Elsa, and I will bring our screen back up here.
Thank you, Josh and Leah. Thank you, Westerheim, for hosting this webinar. We're honored to be here. We're honored to be in front of the Westerheim contingents here, our friends. So thank you very much. So we were first commissioned to work on the first Norwegian Pavilion back in 1987. This is a copy of the Gold Stave Church, which is at Bigton in Oslo at the Norsk Folk Museum. This is the centerpiece of the Norwegian Pavilion. And so then with that lasted until 2015. And then what happened was, of course, Frozen comes along, and the Norwegian Pavilion or Epcot decided to expand the pavilion and change it a bit because of the success of Frozen. And with the change, then the Norwegian Pavilion became the largest pavilion at Epcot.
You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, let's see so in 1987, we did a lot of work. We did a lot of architectural work. You can see the pillars and posts, the carving along by the door there. Elsa did.
Yeah, we did a lot of pieces inside and outside on most of the buildings, and most of that is still there today, like inside and outside of the church. And you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so you can see that on the side of the doors so it's many different types of beams and posts, and all of those are still there today. So we worked on that for over a year, and we did so much that they sent a semi up to get it, and we filled the whole semi. So yeah. So you can go to the next one.
It was quite a job earlier in our career.
Yeah, and there you can see on top there's more ornamentation, but it's all around the pavilion. So most of that is still in place.
We weren't the only carvers. There were carvers from Norway involved. I think there were
two of our classmates, Knut Arnes, and he did the portal on the church, and then Rolf Soger did some of the turn big posts, and the rest was Phil and me.
And both of those people have been instructors at Westerheim over the years.
And they were classmates with us at Dover at Järleid. So then you can go to the next slide.
These are a couple of dragons on the interior of the Stave Church knee posts.
Yeah.
We can go to the next one.
Yeah.
So many people don't realize what it takes to build furniture. So Elsa's a master craftsman, a master cabinet maker, furniture builder. And it starts with wood. This is one step from the sawmill. So this is our not so tidy wood storage place in the bottom of our barn. We have our studios in the top of the barn. The wood storage is in the bottom of the barn. We also keep some horses down there. And Elsa's selecting the lumber for her furniture right here.
Yeah, and the selection process, you can't just take one board next to the other. It's you have to pick them, and you have to pick them right. But it starts with a plan, and then it starts with a drawing, and then you go on to the selecting the wood for the project. And you can go to the next slide. So when they contacted us, we were showing some of the pieces that we did for Epcot, for the pavilion with the Frozen. This was, they wanted a corner cabinet, and this one here was actually a copy of one that is at a museum in Trondheim. It's the only one that they wanted copied. The fun part of working for Disney was that they wanted things built right. They wanted quality, they wanted old techniques, and they wanted it well done. So
They were interested in authenticity as well.
yep.
So what happened was the Disney team, Imagineering team, we worked for Disney Imagineering. So they sent their team to Norway for a couple of weeks, and they traveled around. I'm sure they saw a lot of museums. They traveled all over Norway, and then they came back, and it's a team of about 12 people, interior designers and procurement officers, and the art director was leading this team. So what they did is they came back and apparently they searched the internet after they were done, because they sent us an inspirational book, a book of inspirational pieces, some of which they found in Norway, many of them they found on our website. Some of them they found, for example, with Hans Sandham's pieces, Becky Lust's pieces were in there.
Yeah, most of them was from our website. I think there was one from Hans, and then this corner cabinet here, and then one from Becky. But
so I also made one corner cabinet. You can go to the next slide.
yeah. And then they told me, well, we forgot, but we have 3 identical rooms, so we need 3. We need 3 of them. So here I am finishing the 3 cabinets, and I had to hand carve the design in the door, so it's a solid door with a sliding dovetail on the back, so it can expand and contract. But so one at a time, and here I'm just putting the finishing touches on it. So you can go to the next one.
So another project that we had, they asked us for 2 Cuba Stools. So you can see this slide shows you what Cuba Stools are about. Cuba Stools is a log chair, and you can see on the far right there that it comes from a basswood log, just as it comes from the forest. And then what I do is I use a chainsaw to hollow it out, and the hollowed out blank has to dry for a couple years. And then I fine form the chair. You can see the next one. And then finally, we draw our designs directly on the wood, typically. And then we'll take the pattern from the wood. But I find just spontaneous drawing directly on the wood is, to me, what folk art's about.
Yeah, so they're all one of a kind.
Yeah, so they're all one of a kind.
Yep.
So we can go to the next slide. And this is the princess chair. As I said, we were commissioned to make 2 chairs. This one is covered with acanthus leaf carving, very traditional Norwegian styles from the Gudmundsdalen area of Norway, where my family came from, and also where the school that Elsa and I studied at. I called it the princess chair because, Frozen's all about princesses. And there's just a whole lot of princesses that stand in line.
Little ones.
Little princesses, all dressed up in princess garb, which is really fascinating and touching. And what they want to do is then meet the Disney characters.
Anna and Elsa.
Yeah, Anna and Elsa. And also they get their picture taken sitting in the chairs. The other chair was was raw, and Patti, of course, painted that, but she can tell us about that later. So we can go to the next slide.
So as you wander through the summer home of Anna and Elsa, they kind of funnel you through all these little places, and they divided by having these cabinets. And the first part of my job was to carve 32 feet of this crown molding to go around everything. And so that was a big job too. And if you look really closely, I think there is one of Phil's creatures in the cabinet.
Oh yeah, you can see it behind the glass there. Yeah.
Yep, there it is.
So you can go to the...
You can go to the next one. And here I am just working, gluing it up. it all had to fit, and yeah, it had to be drawn, carved, and put together. So, and then Patti and her team put the paint on it. So then you can go to the next. So this is a hutch that they wanted me to make, and the important part of this, well, first of all, they wanted it traditional, so it's a traditional fromskap, but they had a little lamp in the center that was most important. So I had to design the whole hutch around this little lamp, and then in the end, they actually put my little candle holder in there. So that was kind of
So
fun.
they had inspiration for these pieces, but actually Elsa drew this piece. She drew all the carving. She drew the furniture piece itself. And then we had to submit our designs to this team, the Imagineering team.
The art director.
And then in the end, the art director of Disney had to sign off on all of our drawings.
Yeah. And they accepted everything we
They
did, so-
really never made any changes,
no,
as opposed to the first time we worked for Disney.
on the original one.
On the original, we
Yeah.
didn't have any say
Yeah.
in what the drawings were.
So, and Patti will talk about the painting there.
So another piece we made was a sleigh. There were 2 or 3 sleighs at Epcot at the Norwegian Pavilion. A couple are hanging up in the ceilings. But the art director had seen this sleigh that I had made on our website, and they wanted one like this. This was the inspiration for that. Actually, they wanted a copy. And this sleigh is being pulled by one of my fjord horses. I call it the Sunday sleigh. It's actually a woman's sleigh.
Next slide, yeah.
So here we are up in our studio, bent the runners from white oak. The body of the sleigh was made of butternut. There were no square corners. It was all formed, bandsawed, sanded, and are shaped with knives and so forth. And then I do the design on it. And right now, I think I'm getting a stencil from the side so I can make the drawing for the carving.
Yeah, it's a challenge because everything was curved and shaped, and so it was a challenge. And the drawing was done right on it, so the design would fit the shape.
So I can handle the drawing and most of the engineering, but Elsa had to do all the fine fitting.
Yeah. You can go to the next one.
Here you can see in my carving studio with the knives we use. I don't carve it sitting up like this. I think I was working on the curves. I was probably getting all those curves just right before I did the final carving.
Yeah, and it's made out of butternut, so you'll see that later.
Yeah.
So, and the next one.
Here I'm painting the sleigh. I use a transparent acrylic style on this, and then once I've painted it, then we finish it with Danish oil to bring out the color of the wood.
Next one.
Yeah, this is a picture of the finished sleigh. On the original sleigh, I had a mask or somewhat of a gargoyle mask, which is very typical for Norwegian sleighs. The Disney Imagineering people asked that I design a design with the sunflower for the Princess Anna, and then the other one for Princess Elsa, a little bit colder, so it's more like a snowflake.
Yeah, and this sleigh is the centerpiece of the gift shop at the Epcot Center. So if you go down to visit, you should look for it. It's right in the middle, center stage. So, and it's a full-size sleigh. And the next one. Yeah, so that's a traditional corner cabinet that I made, and Patti painted it. You want to tell a little bit about history? Or?
Oh, about these corner cabinet. So the hutch, the large hutch that we saw, the fromskap, that's a feminine piece of furniture. This is a masculine piece of furniture. The man of the house would keep the Bible on this. Any money that they might have, they didn't really use a lot of money back in those days, and maybe even a flask of whiskey. So this is the corner cabinet is hanging on the wall like this, is known to be a masculine piece of furniture.
Yep. Next one.
We did a few whimsical pieces. They came up to our studio and they purchased some pieces. This was just a whimsical piece that I had carved and painted, and I didn't have any home for it or anything, and they noticed it. They thought that would be attractive. You can go to the next one. They also purchased a nail bowl. One of the typical styles that I like to do. And there's one more piece, a mango board. This is Elsa's piece.
Yeah, that's a traditional too. So they really wanted things that were authentic, and so they wanted the roller with the mango board too. They worked very hard to make sure that everything fit, in the time frame.
Are you going to tell them about the last piece that you made for them? Loose.
Oh, no, the last piece was the one that Patti is going to talk about. The big VIP.
But did you make a loose?
Yeah. So they wanted even what Phil called the lucebrett, which was it's a flat piece that they used to put lice on and kill the lice.
Yeah.
And
It might not be.
Yeah, so that's a traditional for that time period too. So we did other pieces.
So they wanted things authentic down to the point that they knew that in the summer house there was this.
Yeah, they had to kill the lice.
This round, almost like plate.
Yeah.
And
so anyway, that's the end of our presentation.
I also want to say thank you to everyone, and it's an honor to be able to share this experience with you. It wasn't too long ago after I began to rosemale that I heard about some rosemalers that had been to Epcot to do rosemaling at the Norwegian Pavilion or Norway Pavilion, and I think it was Judith Chenstead, Sally DeRoos, and Addie Pitikow, if I remember correctly. And I thought, oh my goodness, when you wish upon a star, huh? But to use a line from another Disney song, I had to let it go. Next. And I did let go of that dream. And I just didn't believe that something that magical was going to happen to me, or at least me as a rosemaler. But don't get me wrong, my life has been and continues to be a grand adventure. Next. So some 30 years later, while I was at work, I received a call from Jason Grant, who was the creative director, and Wyatt Winter, who was the show producer and project manager, so the boss of Jason from Walt Disney Imagineering in Florida. Next. And I think I have to thank Darlene Fossum Martin, who shared my phone number with them, as I think it was she who sprinkled the needed pixie dust for them to reach out to me. And when they asked if I wanted to design and paint rosemaling for the gift shop, which is what you see in this picture, and then for the summer house of Anna and Elsa, my response was not a instant zippity doo-dah. I understood the enormity of the project and the significant commitment of time. So I needed to discuss this with the people whose lives are going to be most impacted by me being gone. But in the end, obviously, I said yes. Next. I traveled to Epcot 3 times, and it was as though I was one of Disney's princesses. In fact, each time I was driven through the security gates, the security guards called me Princess in a Hard Hat. And that hard hat and that lovely orange jacket I had to have on all the time, but I was able to talk OSHA out of having me not wear the goggles because it was just too hard. It's like wearing a mask now. They just always fogged up on me. Next. So as a princess, I had my own limo driver, Willie, who you see on the left, who really was at my beck and call, and a handler, Hannah, who made sure I was taken care of, and she was part of the Imagineering team. And I was put up at different Disney hotels, which I really could never afford as a tourist. And my longest stay was 2.5 weeks, where I stayed at the Animal Kingdom Lodge. Next. On my first trip, I presented my ideas for designs, listened to the plans of the Imagineers, and taught rosemaling to some of the Imagineers, and also to a team of contracted scenic painters. And I was introduced to them as the rosemaling expert, and I thought, oh, good grief. And you know the definition of an expert, don't you? It's anyone who's 20 miles away from home. But you know, I still pinch myself that I taught Disney artists. And I know that everyone in that room was more accomplished than I was. But you know what? I knew rosemaling and they didn't. Next. Between my first trip to Epcot and my second, I did a lot of designing, and these are some of my sketches that I worked on. Next. And I also worked on designs that were used in the ceilings throughout the summer house. And you can see a half circle on the bottom of that picture, and that's where one of the insets for either a speaker or a light would go. Next. So I want to tell you a little bit about the summer house at Epcot. Their team did travel throughout a lot of Norway. And so they decided upon that the summer house was going to be inspired by the Detley House in Norway at the Svalbard Trondelag Folk Museum in Trondheim. And it has been fun to see people comment coming in, because I know some of those people were on those folk art tours. I saw the house in Norway for the first time in 1991 while visiting a cousin who lived in Trondheim. And then I got to know that house much more intimately on two of the Westerheim folk art tours in 2014 and 2016. Next. Near the Detley House at the museum in Trondheim is another old house called the Vikastua. Next. And this house, the Vikastua, is richly decorated and was my inspiration for the ceilings that I designed for Disney. It's interesting to point out that that the painted pieces in the Detley House were painted by Erik Horna, and the Vikastua was decorated by his son Knut Horna, and they were both Uppland Trondelag people. Next. I was sent huge paper panels. I got lost. I was sent huge paper panels with the lights and sound inserts, as I mentioned earlier, marked on them. And some of them were like 20 to 30 feet long and maybe 2 feet wide. And I have a small house, and so I had to work on it in my living room with it rolled out and rolled up, and then I'd do a section, roll it up, but then I'd have to look at it from a distance to see that there was all this flow. And it was really fun, because I was really getting entrenched in knowing that Trondelag style by Knut Horn. And the plan was then to take my designs and punch small holes in them and pounce the designs with chalk into the ceilings, and then the scenic artists would paint them. Next. My designs were approved by the people at Disney and all the artists that I worked with. And then the scenic artists were really excited to paint them. And as you can see by this painted sample, the ceilings really were going to be a lot like the ones at Vikastua in Trondheim. Next. But then, you know, there's always politics. And as I understood it, the rights to Frozen are owned by Pixar, even though Pixar at that time, and maybe still is is a Disney company, and John Lasseter at the time was the head of it. And Lasseter wanted more of the Frozen type painting on the ceilings that you saw in the movie. And this man is Michel Dendalk, senior concept designer, not only at Epcot, but at all of the Disney theme parks throughout the world. And he told me while I was down there that he really liked my designs, and he may have been also on that exploratory trip to Norway, and so he would have seen them. So while I was there, he got on a plane and flew to California, and in his words, he went toe to toe with Lasseter for about an hour, really fighting for my designs. And when I think about it, I'm really humbly honored that someone as important as Michel would fight for my designs. But in the end, Lasseter won. So next, this was my design as you saw earlier. Next. So then on the left, you can see I then started to redesign. I still had the rosemaling elements with the scrolls, and I even used pink to make him happy. But in the end, what you see on the right is what was used. They created stencils, and that was terribly disappointing to the scenic artists, because they wanted to be able to do a little bit of free handwork with my designs, where with a stencil, you just go and slop the color in the open spaces, and then it for them, it then became labor and not a labor of love. Next. So then my third and last trip to Orlando was for 2.5 weeks. I painted, designed, and supervised on site during the day, and then at night in my room. I would bring back some of the small pieces that were part of the display and work on them in my room. But it was really awesome because I was staying at the Animal Kingdom Lodge to see a variety of animals. Next. And if it wasn't too hot, I could paint outside on my little porch. And not only could I see the animals, I could hear them and sometimes smell them too. Next. One of the perks of the job was going for coffee in France, well, the French Pavilion. And here are some of the scenic contracted artists that I worked with at Epcot. Next. I had 2 really close assistants that helped me a great deal with the projects in the gift shop, and then with the painting of the furniture. And this first one is a picture of Tom Ziffer, who was an exceptional colorist. And he must have had magic in his paint stirring stick, because I could just describe a color to him, the shade of a color, and he would mix it up a gallon's worth correctly every time. Next. And the next helper in the gift shop was Michael Pierce. I could start rosemaling something, be called to work on something somewhere else in the complex, and he would continue where I left off. And sometimes it was even difficult for me to tell the difference of where I stopped and where he took over. And that is really the skill of a scenic painter. Next. There was another group of artists for whom I designed and kind of watched over, supervised. And these designs went around the ceiling light fixtures in the old gift shop. I think the old gift shop was called the Puffin's Roost. Next. And these designs were all in style of rosemaling, and the artists did an amazing job. And it gave me so much pleasure to see how they made my designs come to life. Next. So you saw the covered, the gentleman's cover that is on the right, that Elsa made. And I wanted to show you the inspiration for that design. And that is a piece on the left that is at, I believe, Svaresborg in Trondheim. A piece painted by Eric Horna that was in that original Detley house. Next. And then there are some pieces that I designed and painted in Gudbrandsdal. So the piece in the left and the middle piece, or the center piece, is my work. And obviously this picture was taken before I finished the piece on the left. And then a Disney artist did the work on the right. And this young woman was extremely awe-inspiring because she didn't paint with her hands. She had a birth defect and she painted with her elbow and even using a liner brush. I mean, it just blows me away, her talent. Next. And so on the left is a door panel from Vikastua in Norway, and it's from the early to mid 1800s. And that was the inspiration for the three, there ended up being 3 of those cupboards that you see in one of the workrooms on the right. Next. So you just wanted to show you again this piece painted, designed, carved, and painted, not painted, but by Elsa on the right. You've seen that before. And there's another close-up of the sales, a piece in the sales room on the left. And then there's a little Tina, yep, follow that moving arrow. That was one of the pieces that was painted in my room at night. Next. Okay, now these are just some pictures. You can go on to the next. Okay, on this one, I wanted you to see really the contrast of the old traditional that you see with Elsa's cupboard, but then the rosemaling that you see on the door, and how that rosemaling is just, it's, to me, is stiff and lifeless, where the old traditional has that flow, that movement. It seems like a dance. Next, there's the gentleman's cupboard, and then a library step stool in the corner that I painted in my room one night. Next. And then these are just some close-ups of some of the pieces in the gift shop. So we had Telemark, Trondelag, Gudbrandsdal, Hallingdal, Vestagder. So I tried to bring in a lot of different styles so people wouldn't think that rosemaling just looked like, had one look to it. Next. A lot of the work that I did in the gift shop, I had to be on the scaffold, and I had to be on that top part of the scaffold. And something about me is I have a hard time going past the 3rd rung on a ladder. So I couldn't let them know that this really scared me. But I also used that smaller ladder, that silver one, as a workbench to work, and that's where I painted the violin. If you have been down there, I think there's 5 or 6 violins. I painted one, and artists, there were 4 or 5 other artists who painted them, so they all look different, which is pretty cool. Next. One of the Imagineers that I worked closely with is Steve. And he is in the front right-hand corner on the bottom right. And he really was fascinated by rosemaling in general, but specifically the Trondelag style of rosemaling. Next. So he, and I'm sorry that the picture on the left is out of focus, but he and I are trying to come up with the colors we wanted to put on some of the carving, on the carved pieces. But during COVID, and I don't know how many of these people are still employed. I know he was laid off. Several people that I know and has stayed in contact with have been laid off during this time. But during one of his earlier projects during COVID was he had this 6-foot round tabletop, and he wood burned it and stained it and highlighted it using one of my designs, but then he had to tweak it so that it filled the space correctly. And for me to see the tradition executed in new ways and by people who are not entrenched by all the rosemaling rules is just, it just brings me joy, because his creativity, it wasn't stifled, and it just knowing that he has taken this and is bringing it elsewhere just makes it all worthwhile for me. Next. And I was asked to go a little bit out of my tradition of rosemaling, and so you can see on this Ogden trunk there are sunflowers that are in the center of the cartouches on the front panels. And then also there are star-shaped flowers, yep, and on the top you can see them, and those are kind of like the snowflakes. But when I was asked to do the sunflowers, I asked, well, why sunflowers? Because I didn't want to admit it at the time, but I knew very little about frozen. Was that that was Anna's favorite flower. And I said, yeah, but she's not real. And one of the Imagineers told me, well, to us she is. So Anna got her sunflowers on the trunk, but I also thought the Ogden style fit in because of the top crowns. And so there are 2 crowns on here, one for Anna and one for Elsa. Next. So here's the trunk by the fireplace, where it's at now in the summer house. Next. And there's a picture of Anna with her sunflowers. And I'm just pretending here she's looking and admiring the trunk that I painted for her. Next. The grandest piece, in my opinion, that I designed and painted was the piece that you see on the left. And that is not on general display, but it's up in the VIP room that's above this summer house. And this was designed and made and carved by Elsa. And I think it's roughly 6 feet by 6 feet. They can correct me if that isn't right. But I don't know why this piece just spoke to me more than all the others. So this was a piece that I was able to paint in my home, but before I began painting, next, Phil and Elsa had to deliver the piece, extremely well packed, as you can see in the top left-hand corner, in the back of their horse trailer with a couple of their fjord horses. And I believe they were on their way to Calgary, and St. Cloud just happened to be on their way. And then they carried it up the front steps to the living room, which was my studio for the piece. Next. Once painted, I had to carefully pack it up as well as they had packed it up. And then it was picked up by a courier, and it was the only piece for this man's run. And so it was a big day in the cul-de-sac when a semi came in, and they picked it up. He drove it down to Minneapolis St. Paul Airport, and in 4 hours of leaving my house, it was at Epcot, and it was unloaded. And one more, I think, next. So one of the things that I just have to say all the pieces of Philip and Elsa's that I worked on was a real joy, and it was also an honor to be working on their pieces. I know that I probably, I don't know, I would only could work on them as commission work because they're really treasures, and I'm sure far out of my economic reach. But the quality of the work and the love, at least I could feel a love and passion into it. It was just pure joy, and their craftsmanship is just unbelievable. And that was another highlight, to be able to work on some of their pieces. And next. So for me, it's rosemaling is all about connections. So let me tell you a little bit about how how this frozen experience had another connection for me. One of our favorite places to go in Norway is to the Lofoten Islands, and we like to spend time or base out of this little island called Sakrasoy. And we have been there, I don't know, 6 to 8 times. And over those times, we have gotten to become a friend with the owner, Dagmar, who you see having a little matpakka and coffee up on the side of the mountain. And when the Imagineers were there exploring and taking things in and trying to figure all of this out, her son Sven showed the Imagineers around, and he talked about the history and the culture and the nature of northern Norway. And so they were indebted to the help that he gave. And so as a homage to Sven, Sven the reindeer is named after him. And next. So this brings me to the end. There's 100 more different stories I could tell you, but it's my hope that my frozen adventure is contributing to the growth and interest of rosemaling, and actually in all of the folk arts. Thank you.
Thanks to all three of you, I should say. This was so lovely. I'm just sitting here with my camera off, nodding and laughing and smiling, and then realizing no one can hear me. So it's great to see all the chatting going on too. People are just really grateful. And now we're gonna ask you a few of the questions here that people put in the Q&A. Please, if you have questions you'd like us to ask of the panelists, put them into the question and answer section. So we're going to start with Madison's question. I'm interested in becoming a Disney Imagineer. What was it like working with the Imagineers, and how did you come to be hired by Disney? What was your favorite part of working in the Norway Pavilion? So I think you both sort of touched on how you came to be contracted, but maybe just what was your favorite part? Patti, do you want to go first?
Well, there's really so many. To get to know the people that I got to know, some of those Imagineers are incredibly gifted, and it's a bit sad for me to think that many of them are unemployed right now. But getting to know them, but also to be asked to do this. Working on Phil and Elsa's pieces, there were so many highlights. It's hard to just pick one.
Thanks. What about Phil and Elsa?
I think the highlight for me is to go down and visit Epcot. We've been down a few times over the years, 2 or 3 times. And just to watch as people are enjoying the Norwegian culture through the Epcot, the Norwegian Pavilion, and to have all the rosemaling on display, all the folk arts on display, and to see how people react to it. And it's good, clean fun, beautiful art. I mean, I'm always impressed when I go to Epcot about the creativity and that you see there in every aspect. And that's the same with working with the Imagineering team. I mean, they push you.
We only had a good experience.
We only had a good experience with
it.
them.
It was great. I mean, they gave us freedom to be creative, and it was a great team to work with. So we're totally happy.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I'll let Josh ask a question now.
This question is from Ruth, and it maybe relates a little bit to the last one, but how did Disney find out about you two? I mean, I think for those of us here at Westerheim, sometimes we think we're kind of a little community. How did this international organization find you? Maybe we start with Phil and Elsa.
Well, the interesting part of it was that when we worked for them in 1987, the people who we worked for in 2015 didn't realize that we had worked on the original Pavillion. It was a totally different team, and evidently they didn't look into that history. They found us on our website, obviously. I mean, because when they sent us the artist rendition of all the different rooms, and then the inspirational pieces, they pulled a lot of that off of our website. So
and that's what they started with, and we're not hard to find on the web. So
yeah, so I'm sure that's how they found us.
Yeah.
And for me, I think because of the relationship between Westerheim and Disney Pavilion, because of the pieces that are down there, that Disney, the Imagineers, contacted Westerheim. And I know that there were at least 3 names of rosemalers given.
Thank you both. Judy Weiss has a fun question here. She's asking if either of the 3 of you did you paint or carve any hidden things in the designs that only you would know about, such as initials, your face, etc. And I wonder if they'll even tell us, Judy, but maybe we'll get the inside scoop here. I'll start with Elsa.
No, I did put my name in a hidden place. You're not supposed to sign it there, but I did do that. So somebody in the future can see who did the cabinets and stuff. So
No, I didn't pull any tricks. Straight up.
I use a particular detail work that I like to use that most people don't use. So if people know my work and they see that, they'll know it's mine. But we couldn't, at least I signed a contract saying that I couldn't or wouldn't sign my pieces.
There's a question here that I would love to hear about. Are there any specific objects at Westerheim that helped inspire your work for Disney? Put you on the spot here.
Well, so all of the acanthus, I would have to say with the chair, the chair that I carved. I've carved many chairs in the past, but the fully carved chair, the chair that's carved on the outside and the inside as well, was certainly inspired by the Cuba stool at Westerheim. And I believe his name was Halvard Lee from North Dakota, originally from Norway. And I believe that Cuba stool has inspired a lot of acanthus carvers. So, I mean, I can point to that piece right away.
I guess acanthus through all the years and all the people who have come to taught classes and people carving in this country. We're stronger together and we all feed off each other, I think. So thank you to Westerheim.
Mhm.
Yeah, it has to do with the whole culture, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's-
that's what this is about, is
Yeah.
the whole culture of Westerheim and the Norwegian folk arts.
Yeah, so not just one piece, but it's years. I mean, we started, we've been in business now for 42 years. And we started out, I mean, the first summer I came, I grew up in Norway, we went down to Westerheim. So we've had this long history, and we've seen a lot of carvers and painters come, and also had some good friends who now are no longer with us.
But we've been inspired by the teachers that the
Yeah.
Westerheim has brought to this country.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have the opportunity, even traveling around Norway, without having the opportunity to meet all these great rosemaling teachers, these great carving teachers, folk art teachers that Westerheim brings in, and that whole thing, all of that adds to the picture.
Yeah, and we learn from everyone. So
Yeah,
we learn from everyone.
Well, there are so many great questions here, and unfortunately our time is short, so we can't answer them all. Quickly before I wrap this up, I just want to ask Patti, did you paint in acrylics or oils? We've had several people asking.
Because of OSHA, I had to paint in acrylics.
Thank you. Well, it's time to wrap this up, unfortunately, because I feel like we could have you guys speak for a whole other hour and it would just be riveting. Thank you so much to everyone who's in attendance tonight. And a big, big, big thank you to Phil and Elsa and Patti for pivoting to share their professional work in this new online way with all of us. I want to thank Josh for hatching this idea with our panelists. And I want to thank our collections, exhibitions, communication and marketing teams too, who really uplift the folk art school in so many ways behind the scene. There will be a recording of this presentation available on our YouTube channel in probably about 2 weeks from today. Our marketing communication staff is busy, as you can imagine, with all these online programs, but we try to get it up there about 2 weeks out. So Josh, I will now turn it over to you for final remarks.
Well, I want to say thank you to them both too. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, and we've been hatching it, as Leah said, for a few months now. And the more I learn and the more I dig in, the more I'm just fascinated and inspired by all of them. As Leah mentioned, we have a lot of online programs coming up. So know that our next folk art conversation as part of this webinar series is on January 30th. And it's also a free event, just like this one. It's Cooking from the Heart of Norway with Nevada Berg, who is an author of acclaimed food blog North Wild Kitchen. So join her. She's a celebrated new Nordic chef, to learn about her journey into Norwegian food culture and what it means to make Nordic food today. We have lots of opportunities to feature programming related to this new arm of our digital programming, New Nordic Cuisine programming, including a family heritage cooking series, which are also free, just like these events, and open for registration now. Some of these include Pepperkaker with the Bissell family and Lefse with the Kittelsen family, and both of those programs are this weekend. So those are going to be really wonderful, warm programs where families share their traditions with us in a similar format to what you experienced tonight. You should also check out our cocktail making classes and cooking classes, as well as some new programs that we launched last week on Thursday for Q1. So 60+ offerings are now on our website for more folk art programming. So you can find that, collections, chats, all over on our social media. And join us again to see our beloved folk art instructors in topics like rosemaling and basket weaving. We have some upcoming lectures on hardanger fiddles and everything in between. We also have a monthly book prat or book group coming up with, which is also free and moderated by Luther College Nordic Studies professor Maren Johnson. You can register for all of these events online at folkart.westerheim.org or by searching in the Folk Art Online section. So we hope you'll all join us again. At the end of today's program, I'm going to send out a Google Google form survey to you all. We're always trying to learn how to make these programs better, and digital programs are new to all of us. So we're interested in your thoughts. Well, thank you everyone for a wonderful night and for joining us. And we hope to see you again sometime.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.